You'll have to forgive me. My voice is very hoarse today. So Hamadak Yapi, Chante Washte na Pe Chiu Zapie, Shunskawi Imaki Yapie, Majmie, Wakpa Washte Himacha, um, Minikoji Lakota Himataha, Bade Ota Otoe Edwati. Hello, my relatives. I greet you with a heartfelt handshake. My Indian name is White Horse Woman, but my English name is Madge. And I'm Minnie Koju Lakota from the Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation in South Dakota. I live in Minneapolis. Um, we are, myself and Rica are the founders of the Wikoškalaka Omničiye, which means Young Women's Society. And I will pass it on to Rica so she can introduce herself and explain a little bit more about what we do. Thank you for.
Hi, I'm Rica. I am the volunteer coordinator and youth worker here at DIW. I am Seneca. My reservation is in New York, Cattaraugus. My Indian name is Yakotakalite. It means she is healthy and strong. And I'm happy to be here with you guys today. So a little bit about our group. We call ourselves the Young Women's Society. We aim to create a sisterhood between our young women in our group by focusing on social issues that we care about, doing activities that we enjoy, and just building mentorship between our girls, because we range from ages from 12 to 19. So we're really trying to develop a sisterhood, like I said before. We're also a chapter of the Red Ribbon Skirt Society, and that kind of aims to provide support for missing and murdered Indigenous women. And we do things with the girls. We go on field trips, lots of museums, anything that has anything to do with women or women empowerment or Indigenous issues, ceremonies, things like that. So yeah, that's a little bit about our group.
Hamadakiapi, Chante Washte na Pechi Zapie, Grace Makiapi, Dakota Himacha, Tinta Winta Himataha, Minneapolis Adwati, Wania Tuma Ake Shakoni. Hello, my relatives. I greet you with a good handshake. My name is Grace. I'm Dakota from Prairie Island. I live in Minneapolis and I am 17 years old. I go to Minnehaha Academy, and the reason why I joined this group and I chose to be an ambassador was because my grandma was one of the founders of the Red Ribbon Skirt Society, and seeing her doing that work really wanted me, or I wanted to get involved, seeing her do what she does in the Native community. So yeah.
Hello, I'm Sita Baker. I'm 19. I'm a sophomore at the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. I'm Dakota Lakota Ojibwe from Red Lake Prairie Island and Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe. I joined Red Ribbon Skirt Society because I feel it's a responsibility being an Indigenous person and coming from an Indigenous community to support one another. We've all seen this epidemic take places, so it's important that we all take a step and help.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm 14. I'm in 8th grade. I go to Sanford Middle School. My tribe is Janet Roxton, and why
Are you in group?
why my group? I don't remember.
Sorry, they're a little nervous.
I don't remember. I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't remember. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Tamia. I'm 12 years old. I am in 7th grade. I go to Sanford Middle School. I'm from White Earth, and the reason why I'm part of this group is just to talk more about the issues and the issues that I care about. All right. So I start. MMIW stands for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. The issue has been around for a very long time. One could say that Pocahontas was one of the first women taken or trafficked. She was kidnapped so the English settlers could negotiate with her father, the chief of a powerful confederacy. What is that? Confederacy of Powder Hand villages. Okay. For access to more land and better trading rights. She was sent overseas and renamed Rebecca. Pocahontas never returned home. She died suddenly and was buried in Gravesend, England. She was 21 years old when her tribe asked for her remains to be returned in 20th century. The church said they didn't know where she was buried. She used her as an example of how early on Indigenous women have been taken from us. Since then, there really no way of knowing how many have been stolen. More recently, the epidemic has been brought to forefront due in grassroots groups who are on the ground doing the work and helping the families of those who are missing, getting names out there, spreading awareness, and building those relationships with the law enforcement and other so that we could be heard. Here are some recent statistics. 5,712 number of known incidents of missing and murdered Native women. In 2016, the 116 cases were logged into the DOG database. 96% of the number of sexually violence against Native women committed by non-natives on some reservations. 84% of Native women have experienced violence in their lifetime, 10 times more likely to be murdered compared to the national rate. 10 to 24 during this age, homicide is the third leading case of death for Indigenous women. 3 out of 5 AI women have been assaulted in their lifetime. 48% of IN/AN women will experience stalking. These are from 2016. The fact that we don't have more recent stats of this case and point of why this is a problem. Some reason for this includes misidentification of a body, jurisdictional issues, or reports not being made or taken.
Can you change the slide? Man camps are one of the big reasons our sisters are taken. Man camps are the hundreds and often thousands of workers who are brought to an oil, gas, or mining project and are given temporary housing for the duration of a project. Studies have shown that man camps bring violence and localized violent crimes in places where it would not be otherwise. The camps by nature create a rapid increase in the population of the area, which can strain community infrastructures, such as law enforcement, human services, and this happens especially in rural areas where
law enforcement is charged with providing services to extensive swaths of land. The increase in population can lead to an increase in physical and sexual violence, including rape, sexual assault, the sexual assault of minors, and sex trafficking in the affected communities. The vast majority of the workers at man camps are non-native. Because of the limits of criminal jurisdiction in Indian country, the tribe cannot prosecute them for any acts of criminal violence, including sexual assault and sexual trafficking. The experience of sexual violence can lead to severe depression, long-term mental health issues, less educational attainment, drug abuse, anxiety, PTSD, and even suicide. And the impacts of trauma are not just held by one person, but are felt as a ripple effect across their community. The initial victim is likely a daughter, sister, wife, mother, cousin, friend, and parent, and her trauma will be experienced by all. The red dress and the red hand have been the symbols of No More Stolen Sisters movement. The color red is the color that the spirits can see. So when we hang the red dresses or we wear them, we are letting those spirits know that they are being remembered. It's a call to those who are missing and hoping that they can see that we are looking out for them and praying for them. The red hand, often shown over the mouth, is meant to represent those who have been silenced about this issue. It can also be seen as a symbol that we will no longer be silenced. The No More Stolen Sisters movement refers to the publicity and that this finally obtained. Social media, including Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, are bringing awareness to this issue. Often pictures are shared on Facebook and can reach more people all over the country than the typical posters used in the past. Looking up hashtags or just MMIW can lead to information. Also, media in general have picked up on it. For example, the movie Wind River, which is specifically about a young Native woman who was murdered from men who are a part of a man camp. News segments committed to MMIW have become more common in podcasts as well. The November 15th, 2021 issue of People magazine featuring 3 pages of MMIW and asking for tips. There have been marches for several years now across the United States and Canada as well, which we have participated in. Even doing a presentation like this is helping the movement. The question remains, are people paying attention? Do they care? For example, Gabby Petito went missing and everyone knew immediately about her. Meanwhile, in the very state that she went missing, Wyoming, 710 Indigenous women were reported missing between 2011 and 2020. In the 8 days between when Petito's family reported her missing on September 11th and when Petito's remains were found on September 19th, 3 Indigenous people, Sterling Prince Red Star, Marky Shea Williams, and Clowell Buck Elk, were reported missing in Montana. Yet we don't know their names. We're not saying she deserves less attention, but rather missing Indigenous peoples deserves the same.
The MMIW, can you go to the next slide, please? The MMIW epidemic has greatly affected families in Indian country and in Native urban community. Grief is complicated and is very complicated for the family members specifically and friends of those who are missing. They mainly hold on to the hope that the relatives is still alive and out there, wondering what is happening to them and praying for their safe return. In many cases where several years have passed, knowing the outcome will most likely be the worst, how does one appropriately grieve? It is this complicated grief that we as Red Ribbon Skirt Society want to help out with. Historical trauma is also very prevalent in our communities. Our population has been exposed to generations of violent colonization, assimilation policies, and overall loss. The effects of historical trauma among Native Americans include changes in the traditional ways of children rearing, family structure, and relationships. The effects of historical trauma can be manifested in many ways. Among our people, it is included in the following: a breakdown of traditional Native family values, alcohol and other substance abuse, depression, anxiety, suicide, child abuse, neglect, domestic violence, post-traumatic stress disorder, general loss of meaning, sense of hope, internalized oppression, self-hatred. This historical trauma makes us more vulnerable to becoming MMIW. Knowing that our missing and murdered relatives, and in particular our women, have been disregarded and ignored for many years is very triggering and traumatic. MMIW links all the way back to the boardings and residential schools. Children were stolen from their families and forced to schools by the government or a church. They were generally sent to a school that was far from their home and their families and general land where they came from, so they could not return. Children were made to cut their hair, change their clothing, and no longer speak in the language or practice their own traditions or religion. In the words of Richard Pratt, who started Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania, "Kill the Indian, save the man." These schools were all over in the United States and Canada. Recently in Canada, at the Camplands Indian Residential School, the remains of 215 children were found. Since then, there have been more discoveries, with 7,013 children's remains found. These children were taken from their homes and died away from families. Often the families were not notified or lied to about how and when they died. As mentioned earlier, the families were in general too far away from the school to know any of this information, so the bodies were buried on the school site and not returned. Recently, of 9 youth who attended Carlisle Indian School were returned to the Rosebud Reservation. This is a step of repatriation that we can start for the healing process. Returning the children to the original homelands is long overdue. Finding our MMIW and returning them to their families is essential for the healing as well. This is the beginning of what can be done to combat the crisis. Our group is a chapter of Red Ribbon Skirt Society, which is based in Rapid City, South Dakota. Societies and grassroots groups like these do work to try and ensure that the crisis is confronted. Our group has created a sisterhood where we have each other's backs. We, as young women, have the target on our backs. Here are some facts on human trafficking, which goes hand in hand with MMIW. Can you go to the slide just before, please? 800,000 children go missing every year in USA. Every 30 seconds, another person becomes a victim of human trafficking. 50% of human trafficking victims are children, 80% are female. The average lifespan of a human trafficking victim once they are enslaved is 7 years. Minneapolis is ranked number 2 in the nation for online solicitation and recruitment of minors. Fishing opener and hunting opener are 2 human trafficking events in Minnesota. During ice fishing, victims are bought and sold in ice houses on area lakes such as Mille Lacs. In Duluth, victims are bound and put in crates and loaded as cargo in ships. Human trafficking is happening in towns and cities in all 50 states. The Super Bowl is the largest human trafficking event in the United States of America. Human trafficking is the second largest criminal industry, generating $32 billion in profits every year. St. Cloud is now the largest trafficking and training hub in Minnesota. On May 29, 2015, 9 men were arrested in Baxter, Minnesota, of solicitation of a minor. The men range in age from 27 to 71 years old.
Legislation and other ways to combat this crisis has started in the U.S. In the state of Minnesota, Mary Kunish of Standing Rock, Lakota descent, and the first Indigenous woman to serve on the Minnesota Senate helped to create the MMIW task force in 2019. The goal is to examine systemic causes behind the violence that Indigenous women and girls experience examine
appropriate methods for tracking and collecting data on violence against Indigenous women and girls, including data on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, report on policies and institutions that impact violence against women and girls, report the measure necessary to address and reduce violence against Indigenous women and girls, and examine measures to help victims, victim families, and victims' communities prevent to heal from violence that occurs against Indigenous women and girls. There is a missing and murdered Indigenous relative office that is planned to open by the end of this year and has backed by our Lieutenant Peggy, Governor Peggy Flanagan, who is a member of the wider nation. There is also an office for MMIW, cold cases that are established under the Operation Lady Justice Task Force in Bloomington, Minnesota. The other 5 states that have these offices are Arizona, Indiana, South Dakota, Montana, and New Mexico. And as a part of the Operation Lady Justice Initiative, Interior Secretary Deb Haaland announced the Missing and Murdered Unit this year. We have to see any solved cases from these offices, but they are fairly new, so there is hope there.
Oh. I will tell you where this act came from. Her name was Savannah LaFontaine Graywin. In 2007, she was lured into an apartment in Rica, North Dakota, and murdered. She was 22 years old and 8 months pregnant. Her baby was removed from her room and survived. Oh. Her neighbors wanted the baby, so they took it from her, literally, from her body, and discarded her. Sorry, Savannah was found in Red Lake River on North Dakota, in Minnesota border. Let me go back. Savannah Act is a bill directs the Department of Justice, DOJ to review. Yeah, I'm nervous. I'm so nervous.
Sorry, she's nervous. I'm going to read it for her. Savannah's Act is a bill that directs the Department of Justice, DOJ, to review, revise, and develop law enforcement and justice protocols to address missing and murdered Native Americans. Report statistics on missing or murdered Native. It will also require the Department of Justice to have training for law enforcement officers, from the tribal police to the FBI, to understand what their role is in finding these women and putting the families at ease, that their case is being taken seriously. Because in the past, most families have reported that they didn't feel the law enforcement authorities took enough action to try and locate their missing loved one. There is a lot of work yet to be done, but we are finally starting to see the steps in the right direction. Community partnerships with schools, businesses, and organizations to continue awareness, safety protocols, and resources for families is needed. Gaining and/or creating a trusting partnership with law enforcement, including on and off the reservation, needs to happen. Large-scale public awareness campaigns need to happen as well to keep this at the forefront so that we don't have to say no more stolen sisters.
I would also just like to say that this topic, it can be triggering for people, and it can be hard. It can be a hard topic to talk about, and to if it's kind of it's a difficult topic, is what I'm saying. So I think I should have prefaced our presentation with that, because some of these facts are, they're sad, they're horrific, they're real, they're happening. And so I apologize for not giving that pre-warning, I guess you could say. So I apologize for that. And then I'm gonna look on the chat here. If there isn't any immediate questions, I do have another slideshow that shows some artwork and other stuff that specifically our Young Women's Society has done here and also in Rapid City, South Dakota. So I can.
Madge, I think that would be great.
Okay. How do I find my other Google Doc? Whoops. Okay, so this is an installment in Rapid City, South Dakota, outside of the Journey Museum. This was on May 5th of past year. May 5th is a National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Children. And that was created by a young woman named Hannah Harris, who was murdered outside. She's from Montana. May 5th was her birthday. And so that is the National Day of Awareness. I believe it was established in 2018 or 2016. And so the teepee was set up, and then the 4 direction prayer ties and flags are in there. There's the altar in the center. And then we made shadow boxes that represented individuals that were taken. So here are some of them. The one in the lower, well, my right-hand corner, actually a good friend of mine. Her name was Cheyenne Fiddler. She was isolated from her friends and her family, and she wasn't located. She was missing for a while. And they finally tracked down where her boyfriend was, and she had been. They found him dead, but they couldn't find her. And eventually, when they moved his body, she was underneath him, and so he had killed her, and then he had killed himself. She was a powwow dancer, and she was really a beautiful person. She is also from my resident, so that's why I dedicated my box to her. Hannah Harris, again, she's a young lady out of Montana who was murdered. Some of these boxes were made from, and then also my daughter, well, Grace and Sita are my daughters, if you couldn't tell. And so I had done a presentation last year at Minnehaha Academy So some of the students there actually created these boxes. Again, it's just a chance for us to spread this awareness to people that really don't know anything about it. And so, yeah, this is some of the artwork. This is also out as well. You can see they're wrapped up due to like the weather, and you know, just the elements being outside. Also, Rapid City does have a high rate of homeless people, but that art installation was well protected. Like no one messed with it, and even like the homeless people around there for it because they remember those women. Here at the Division of Indian Work, our young women, for May 5th last year, we put up dresses on the outside of the gate. One of them's still barely hanging in there, so we're gonna have to redo it. And then we also passed out red felt dresses to everyone here in the building. Oftentimes we wear them on our clothing. If you're wearing one, for somebody to say, what are you wearing that for? And then you can talk about it. So that's another way to spread that awareness and education. I think a really cool story is one of our tutors here, or maybe Rica, you can tell about Ben.
Oh yeah, one of our tutors, Ben, he wanted to do a peace walk around the world, which is really cool. Like literally, he said it was going to take 8 to 12 years to do it. And so we gave him a little MMIW dress pin for him to put on his backpack as he took that walk. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to do the whole thing, but it was so awesome that he actually took the time to do that for us and spread that awareness.
Rica, we have a question here. Madge, we have a question.
Okay.
Says, it's taken great courage to tell us about the Young Women's Society. Thank you very much. For anyone on the panel, what have you liked, for any of the girls, what have you liked most about being part of the
They said, what do you like most about, or what do you like most about doing?
Do we need a little more time for people to think about how they want to respond to that one? We have a couple more questions we can go to. Is it?
Well, sorry, our internet went out, so she can answer that question.
My favorite part is having a space where I can be with other young Indigenous women and talk about these issues, just because I don't have that space at my school that I go to. And so having that here is nice. Also like going places with the other girls, like to museums. Like today we're gonna go to the Van Gogh exhibit. I don't know where it's at, but
Great.
yeah.
Thank you.
Let's talk more.
All right.
I would say my favorite part is that even though we don't see each other every week, we all know each other. We see each other often enough to that we have a community structure. It's not earlier, and I really like that.
All right. Madge, we're getting a message saying your network bandwidth is low. I don't know if there's anything you can do about that at this point. If it's all right, I'm going to direct a question to Rica for a minute here. Is it correct that Indigenous communities can now arrest and incarcerate suspected criminals?
I'm actually not sure. I haven't heard about that. Hopefully.
I hadn't either. That would be a step. Okay, Rica, let me ask one more for you here. There's a question. I recently heard about a movement called Know Your Value, encouraging older women to realize their worth. Being a senior, this person says she was interested in that. I'm encouraged to see that young women are also learning to know your value. Rica, could you share with us like a specific activity that you do as part of the group that would help a young woman know her value?
One thing we try to do a lot is ceremonies. We haven't really gotten a chance to because of COVID, but those are really times to get into our spirituality, get into ourselves, and then have conversations about how we're feeling. And if one of our youth is feeling a little down or whatever, we make sure that we let them know that they're beautiful, that they're valued, that they, mean something to us. It's hard being a young woman these days, especially with social media. All these girls with their perfect bodies, things like that, and it's not real life. So we want to make sure that they know that they're beautiful in themselves, and also like doing those women empowerment events. We went to an event a few years ago. I can't remember exactly what it was called. It was an all women panel. I think Soledad O'Brien, she was the panelist. It was a really cool event, and it was just women, young women all over the city, all different races, just coming together and talking about these issues. And yeah, it was awesome. We try our best.
Great, thanks. Okay. Is anything being done, or can you guys think of anything that could be done to get more fair, more equal media coverage for missing and murdered Indigenous women? You told the story of the white woman who was all over the news for a week, and but at the same time there were Indigenous women whose stories weren't being covered at all, even in the same state. So what if anything can be done about that, or is being done about that, to get better coverage? Any thoughts on that one?
I think like doing things like this obviously is helping. And also like, of course, social media and how often everybody has social media. And so that's definitely one way that this can keep getting out there. I think that there is a study that was done by the Illuminative organization. 40% of Americans don't even really believe that Native Americans were ignored in general.
Madge, I think we're having that network bandwidth again. Your voice and your face image.
Hold on, she's coming to this computer. Kind of what you said.
Everything? Oh man, sorry.
Okay, thank you. So the last thing we heard was 40% of
Illuminative organization that stated that around 40% of Americans don't even know that we exist, that Native Americans are still here, and that we're current. Like we don't live in teepees, we don't live out on the prairies and that kind of thing anymore. We're here, we're people, and so even overcoming that obstacle of being recognized and acknowledged is hard enough, let alone anybody worrying about those that are missing. So it's very difficult. I do believe social media is a big help. But it is starting to come to the forefront, even natives in general being on social or just media, like the People magazine article is like a huge thing. Like it was like what we're represented in this magazine that thousands of people read. So those little things are starting to help this. But you know, we don't only just want this negative part, the MMIW part, to be spoken about in the media. We need positive things to be spoken about us too. And that goes back to when the person asked, know your worth. Well, we aren't seen being represented in any way, or if they don't even know we exist, what does that do to your self-esteem and your worth? You know, are we worth it to be in the movies? Are we worth it to be on the news? Are we worth it to be here in general? And we are. And so that's the whole point of like our young girls group. Like we see them and we acknowledge them as adults, and they're young women, and oftentimes they're not seen not just because they're Native girls, because they're teenagers. Kids are often brushed off, not listened to, that kind of thing. And so just even acknowledge them as young women. And then adding on this Indigenous aspect to it, which we always strive to do that because that's who we are.
Madge, we have time for one last question here. We need to wrap up at 10:45 because I have to tell about what's coming next week. But we have one last question here. I was impressed that so many of you spoke your native languages so fluently. I wondered how and when you learned them, and how common is it for Indigenous people to speak their native languages today?
It is not very common. Once again, going back to that boarding school, residential school area, they were literally beaten when they spoke their language. And so a lot of that was lost. I currently am a Dakota language teacher at the American Indian Center, but I'm not a fluent speaker. My grandma went to boarding school, so she lost her language. And so it's a lot of just being self-taught. There's literature out there. And also just asking your elders. You know, those are two of these girls are my daughters, so I teach them that. We teach it here at DIW. We do language classes. We try and incorporate that. And it's just about trying to use it every day. Like I tell people, if you go to France, you're going to learn how to say hello. You're going to learn how to say thank you because you're on their territory. You're on their land. You're in Minnesota. You're in Minnesota. You're on Dakota land. You should at least know how to say hello or thank you or something like that, right? Because you would do that to any other nation. And so that's a lot of where we try and keep that language going, and just even learning one word is fine because at least you're acknowledging that this is where we are.
Okay, so how do you say hello?
So for women, we say huh, and for men, they say how.
How?
Yep. And for women, it's huh. And then, so of course, I want to say pidamia, which means thank you in Dakota, or wopida, which is many thanks. You know, for having our group here, we kind of had like 8 girls, but this morning was like, we can't make it. So, you know, it's all right. But yeah, so yeah, I guess I want to say thank you for having us and allowing us to use this platform to spread this awareness.
Well, thank you very, very much for your time and sharing your experiences and your program with us. And it looks like just a wonderful program, and we're very happy to be able to support it in any way we can. So at this point, Madge and Rica and girls, this is where we have to ask you to use your imagination and imagine that there's an audience in front of you. They are all clapping and saying, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. So, okay. so thank you guys so much for your time and your sharing your knowledge and experience with us. Okay, with that, I need to go and talk a little bit about what we have coming up. So more wonderful programs coming. Next week, we have Hazel Belvo, who will be talking about her new book. So Plymouth member Hazel Belvo, How Can Art Foster Our Spirituality? So that'll be a wonderful session coming up next week. And then the week after that, we have Nina Johnson talking about what Plymouth kids want Plymouth adults to know. And then the week after that, we have the Family Tree Clinic coming in to introduce their clinic, our new facility across the street. And they're going to come in and tell us about their program. So wonderful programs coming up. Thank you so much for being here. And with that, we are finished. Thanks so much.